Guns. They put the shooter in first-person shooter, the S in FPS, the gun in gunfight. And let's be honest, the best ones are on PC. The act of pointing a gun at a bad guy in a video game, then killing them dead with it, is as old as the medium itself. And over the decades, game developers have dreamed up countless imaginative ways to dole out death from a distance. From Doom's iconic shotgun to the more outlandish weaponry like Duke Nukem 3D Shrinker, these are some of the most gratifying virtual triggers you can pull on PC. It's far from the most glamorous weapon in our list, but the brutal simplicity of Doom's classic shotgun is hard to beat. Watching demons explode in a fountain of gore as Doom Guy racks up the next shot is about as satisfying as first-person shooting gets. You should never judge a book by its cover, they say, but you can judge a shooter by the quality of its shotgun, and Doom's is one of the best around. This monstrous weapon lets you fire depleted uranium slugs at enemies at such high velocities, the unfortunate victim explodes on impact. Its immense power and the speed of its projectiles makes it a force to be reckoned with, especially in a deathmatch. And watching that trademark coil of blue smoke swirl towards an enemy, and seeing them explode in a splash of gibs at the end of it, never gets old. You can even take out two enemies at once, if you time it right. The other guns on this list depend on ammo of some kind, which is often in short supply. But the beauty of the gravity gun, or the 0-point energy field manipulator, if you insist on using its full name, is that everything is ammo. A wardrobe? Ammo. A saw blade? Ammo. A cinder block? Yep, that's ammo too. Everything is ammo, which is handy when you're surrounded by shambling headcrab zombies. You won't find a best guns list on the internet without this thing on it. But there's no getting around the fact that the cerebral bore is one of the most gruesomely devilish and imaginative FPS weapons ever designed. Squeeze the trigger and a tiny projectile will be released, then home in on your target's head. When it makes contact, it will drill into their skull, then explode magnificently when it reaches their brain. Unnecessarily cruel, perhaps? Probably. But let's not dwell on that. Pretty much every weapon in Quake is a classic of the genre. But there's something supremely cathartic about the fearsome rat-a-tat of the nail gun. Watching this thing chew through enemies as you unleash a fury of sharp, rusty nails is peak Quake. Yeah, its big brother, the Super Nail Gun, is faster and scarier, but the chunky, no-nonsense design of the standard model makes it feel somehow more deadly. This legendarily brutal weapon fires explosive blasts of white-hot, jagged metal, which dice enemies into gory, bite-sized chunks. It's particularly deadly in close combat, but if you need to create some space between you and an opponent, its secondary fire mode is a handy grenade launcher. These grenades detonate on impact, releasing shards of deadly, shredding shrapnel as they explode. It's tough to master, but when you nail it, the flak cannon can be unstoppable. Duke Nukem 3D has a fine array of traditional weaponry, including a great shotgun. But there's something irresistible about the Shrinker. Fire a glob of green energy at an enemy, and they'll shrink to the size of a rodent. Then all it takes is a stomp from Duke's boot to finish him off. Bosses and mechanical foes are immune, but everything else is fair game. Blood is famous for its massive arsenal of weird, wonderful weapons. In comparison, the relatively straightforward Tommy gun might seem like a weird choice. But when you're wielding two of them at once, wildly spraying enemies with bullets, you'll understand why. Its high rate of fire makes mincemeat of enemies, and the constant tinkle of spent shell casings hitting the ground as you fire is oddly satisfying. As the name suggests, this fiendish weapon launches sharp, pointy sticks at terrifying velocities. It's one of the slowest weapons in Painkiller, but makes up for it by being able to pin enemies to walls, turning them into floppy ragdolls. And if you want something with a little more kick when you're being swarmed by snarling enemies, it's alternate fire mode lets you launch grenades that explode on impact.